Hello, podcast audience. Welcome to Keiser University Flagship Campus, Lead the Way. I'm your host, Bob Fashano, and each month we invite business and community leaders to come to our studio and share their leadership insights with you, our audience. And today we are particularly honored to have Dr. Gary Vonk with us, who is the president of Keiser University Flagship Campus. So, Gary, thank you so much for being here, Dr. Vonk.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Now, what I'd like to do, Dr. Vonk, is I'd like the audience to, I know a little bit about your background and your journey, your business background. We know that you're the current president of the Flagship Campus, but I would like our audience to know about your leadership journey, your business background, and what got you to this point. What led you to this point?
Sure, that's a great idea. Well, I spent most of half of my career in California, up and down the state of California. I grew up out there, spent a bunch of years in retailing, started out running the cash register and ended up ultimately being the CEO of a retail company. So along the way, I learned a lot of things about that journey, and that was, so I became a district manager, regional, and all those sorts of things, VPs, and then ultimately moved to another company. And ultimately, after working at several different companies, I worked at the opportunity to really be able to use my skills running the entire organization. So I did that in those 30 years. I was the president or CEO of a half a dozen public and private companies for private equity people, from jewelry, automotive. We took a division of Chrysler private. We recapitalized it and repositioned it and ultimately sold it to Wayne Huizinga and the guys down at AutoNation. And other companies, ran a jewelry chain out in California, came back here, ran a motorcycle roll-up business here in Florida. We bought about 25 dealerships and about 85 franchises, and really began to reposition that business, which has changed, and it actually stayed the same, much like automotive did, except that automotive about 40 years ago created programs that allowed them to get the inventory they wanted versus the inventory that the manufacturers desired to give them. And so I worked on that for a while, recapitalized it, and we worked with some private equity people. So I've really had the opportunity to take teams of people. A perfect example is one of the companies I went into. I gathered all of the leadership and the senior VPs and everybody around the table. I said, you people are now worth more than you were yesterday. And they go, what do you mean by that? And I go, well, I don't know anything about the business. And you guys have been in the business for a long time. And so I realized that one of the things I need is I bring the leadership here, but you bring the experience. And so we really focused on being able to do that. And then subsequent to that, we spent a bunch of time talking about why I was there, why the organization had recapitalized and repositioned, and what we needed to do next. And I was going to rely on them from their expertise within the organization to find the spots we need to make changes. So I've had a very interesting journey. And then education-wise, about 20 years ago, one of the people that works at the Keiser University and I were in a group that had been together for 35 years, playing golf once a year during September. And I was busy traveling out to Seattle as a CEO of a company in Seattle, and lived here. So every Monday I'd leave 12 days, I'd come back and get a change of clothes, go back to work. And at the time, I talked to one of the leaders here, and I said, what do I need to do to start teaching? And so he said, well, you got to have a master's degree and 18 credit hours and a concentration. So I said, okay. And then 2 years later, I called him on December the 9th. And I said, when do I start? And he goes, what are you talking about? I go, well, you told me 2 years ago that I needed to get a master's degree, 18 credit hours. I finished on Saturday. And so he goes, holy smoke, I'll call you back. And so I started teaching here 20 years ago and 19 years ago, and having run, 3,000 locations in 20 countries, I guess they figured I could run a campus. Mm-hmm. So that's what happens. And that was the fun part of all of this, and I'm really proud of that. And then I did a doctorate degree in the meantime and just started operating with the idea that we're going to change people's lives. And that's what happened.
Well, there you have it, audience. That's quite a journey. That's quite a journey. Dr. Vonk is not a rookie at leadership, that's for sure. That to me, that sparks a question. With that background, which is quite extensive and diverse, by the way.
Yes.
Not limited to one particular industry. you must have acquired all those years some form of a leadership philosophy that really kind of governed your behavior, your thought process, your actions, and how you built
Sure.
things and developed things. Could you share with us a leadership philosophy that you
Well,
had?
one of the simplest things I think about when I look at an organization like I've been here 10 years, I look back and I kind of look at the things that we've done and the people that we have in place, is I often rely on putting responsibility in the hands of those who have earned it. And if you look effectively at the people who are in part of your organization, no matter where I was in all those organizations, I look for those within the organization who earn that leadership role.
Mm-hmm.
And they earn it by virtue of not only their ability to execute on the plan, but also by virtue of the fact that their knowledge within the industry and the things that are important to the industry, and truly, really where the direction is that the organization wants to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I sort through having sorted through many organizations and found the right people to be part of those organizations, the single focus that I've had is putting responsibility in the hands of those who have earned it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do that, I think I've got the right people in place. Matter of fact, when I was the CEO of Midas, I told them, I said, here's the deal is I want the day come when my phone never rings, because I figure you guys took care of all of it. And that was the plan. And then I walked out and asked the new secretary how she takes her coffee. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing I think organizationally I do. I do it today with my team of people. They're in the spot. It's not exactly the same people we started with 10 years ago here, but it's a group of people that really, truly I have trust in their ability to do that.
Yeah. You know, that is a powerful, profound, I would say, nugget that you should grab a hold of and you should use, audience. You don't get to be a leader unless you've earned it.
Yeah.
That's almost a direct quote. And that's a good leadership philosophy to maintain, because if that cascades down through the organization, your team knows where you stand and they know where they stand. And that's really important in leadership. Thank you for that.
Yeah, sure.
That's a beautiful gem. And that's a good segue to team building, which obviously is something that you've done prior to Keiser.
A couple times.
Yeah, and you certainly have done it here. So do you have a philosophy about team building, or what's important about that to you? And I know that's two questions, but do you have an underlying framework for team building, something that is important to you about that?
Well, I think it's important for everybody to understand within the puzzle what role they play. Team building is about building the puzzle that ultimately becomes the organization that you're trying to create. And as long as I have the vision and others ultimately share that vision, then part of that has to do with the team building. And when we build and everybody understands their role and responsibilities, two things happen. One is they take ownership of what they have to accomplish, and they seek assistance from others in order to achieve it as a team. Because, I mean, if we're working on travel and somebody's working in the athletic department and they're working on travel, but somebody in our travel department needs to get assistance from that, you have to realize the whole destination strategy that we have to accomplish those objectives. So we all have our single area of responsibility within the organization, but each of those people shares the responsibility of the overall organization of achieving our objectives. And we talked today even about really changing students' lives, that the role that we play at an institution like this is changing students' lives. And we have 4 years to do that. I often tell parents when they drop their kids off, I say, thanks a lot. We'll work as hard as we can to get rid of her. And we're going to work as hard as we can in those 4 years to do that, knowing that they come to us like a bottle with messages in it, and those messages have been put in there by their family and friends until they get here, and we'll get to put a few messages in that bottle, and ultimately put a cork in it, and it'll wash ashore someplace. And they'll begin to use those little tidbits that they get in that bottle. They'll oftentimes not remember where they got those, but organizationally, I think that part of what that does is that people have to realize that within an organization, there are many, many tidbits of information that they will use. They don't necessarily have to know exactly where it came from, but they know it's the right thing to do. And that's the fun part of building an organization, a team of people who really, truly interact that way.
Yeah, I mean, what I heard is the team collaborates and rallies around the cause. And the job of a leader is to put the cause out there, put the vision out there, but putting them together and having each person take ownership, because you said that, take ownership of their role, their respective role in that execution of that's really a good philosophy for team building. That's really great. Part of team building, also, from my experience, has been the development of trust. And what I mean by that is how, and maybe this is really the way I want to ask this question, Dr. Vonk, how does a leader establish and sustain trust with his or her team?
I think trust is developed over time. We trust each other based on our experience. And within an organization, trust is developed over time when we come to some objective or conclusion of directions or what we want to accomplish. And then we have to ultimately trust each other to accomplish those things based on what we understand about not only each other, but the organizational destination. Mm-hmm. We have to know that we develop a period of trust where we can be trusted if, in fact, we understand not only the goals and objectives, but what role we play in that. And that's where I think organizational trust and those sorts of things come into place. That trust also comes from being able to rely upon people to do those sorts of things without really writing down a big list of things to do. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to trust people. Once you build an organization of people and put in place the people who you've ultimately trust to do those sorts of things with the responsibility that they have, you have to really be prepared to step back. Trust puts you in that position. Trust puts you in the position to be able to say, okay, I'm not worried about that because the person responsible for accomplishing that objective is somebody on my team who I trust. And ultimately, I think that's the role that a good leader plays, is that is once you arrive at the destination of where you can trust people, then you really have to step back and say, okay, let's collectively understand the organizational goals and objectives, and then look at them to be able to use the skills they've developed to accomplish them.
Well, we're going pretty fast here, and I would just want to remind you all, if you are on a treadmill or you're in your car listening to this, stop, sometime soon stop, play it back and take some notes, because we are just experiencing, and there's more to it, Dr. Vonk, I'm not going to let you off the hook just yet. We are experiencing a masterclass in leadership. I hope you will embrace that, audience. So I have a few more questions for you, sir.
I'm here.
In most businesses, I'm sure in higher education you've experienced that also. As a leader, we are thrust oftentimes into conflicts. There are disagreements. There are, we deal with people. And I don't know if you've experienced this, everybody, but people are complicated, okay, myself included. And we're not machines. We have emotions. We have feelings. And as a result of that, as a leader, we are put in places where we need to help resolve a conflict or a disagreement. So my question to you, Dr. Vonk, with all your experience and your leadership experience, have you developed for lack of a better term, I might say, have you developed a process for how you would prepare yourself to go into a conflict resolution situation or a disagreement? Have you thought about do you have a process or a system that
I think it depending upon the significance of the problem. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes problems develop not only because of what's happening below you, but from what happens above you. Organizationally, from a board of directors, from any of those organizational things, even from a constituent population or a group of franchisees that you work for ultimately. I think some of that is a function of what am I organizationally, where are the pressure points for me? And so that's part of how you can really reconcile what to do with conflict and conflict resolution. The second part of conflict resolution, ultimately from a leadership standpoint, goes back to the putting responsibility in the hands of those who've earned it again, which don't wear out a term. But if I have faith in the team of people that we've developed over time, that they can assert themselves in a way that I think will be justified in the environment, then I should trust them to do that. I can't second guess. They realize that. I hope my people realize that second guessing isn't part of my kind of my makeup. That once we've come to the conclusion or we've developed personalities within the organization that achieve the objectives, that I'm able to, the conflict resolution is significantly less because they're handling them the way I would handle them.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes you get to them where I think people realize that it's something that's beyond it. We've done that a number of times in the recent past about they come in and they say, I get how to do most of this, but I really need you to sit down for a second and talk to me about how to accomplish this objective in order to satisfy those people within the organization who may not understand the reason we're doing this, in order for us as a team to be able to deliver on our promise. And so I think that the important part from a team standpoint, for strategy standpoint on conflict resolution is know how far you can go team-wise, and then know how far you can go, and when you stop, what you need to do in order to accomplish the ultimate objective. Mm-hmm. And I think that those two valuable and important criteria are necessary in an organization that doesn't have all the answers written down. We don't. If we had all the answers, this would be easy stuff.
Right.
All these jobs would be simple.
Yep.
There aren't any of them that are simple.
But that's part of leadership. Part of leadership is being prepared, as you point out, knowing what to anticipate as far as conflicts are concerned, and having the right people and empowering them. Yep. Empowering them to work through that themselves, knowing that you've got their back, so to speak.
Right, to know how much they could do, how far they can go out on the plank.
Right.
How much, and also equally as important is for them to know when to stop on that plank.
Yes.
And turn around and say, hey, throw me that life preserver. I think I need a little help. And that's okay. That's true. They have to know both of them.
But you're there for that if you need to.
And they know that.
But there is no micromanagement. There is none of that going on.
That happens early on in the process of developing managers. Right. Micromanagement happens early on when the team member replaced or a new team member joins, or when an activity takes place that's unique to the organization. You have to be able for people to stop and say, okay, let's start micromanaging for a little while until we begin to realize how closely aligned to something else we do this particular activity is, and then we kind of marry those two things until we get to the objective. Because we've already got the skills. We develop those skills, something new comes up, there's a pretty good chance with higher education, for example, that when we dream something up, new programs, new activities, new things to do, that when we look at those things, we say, okay, how is this similar to the things we've already done? So we can check those boxes, in the pennants on the wall and the trophies in the case, and say, okay, we did that. Now there's something new, but we could do a bunch of that stuff. And here's a little bit of the new stuff we have to learn how to do. And that's kind of what we have to do as a team.
Yeah, I want to talk about culture for a moment. You and I are familiar, and maybe some of our audiences, but probably not many of you have heard of Peter Drucker. He is the founder, I guess, of modern day management, professor. And he had a statement that really, really stayed with me for a long time. Still does to this day. I want to share it with the audience. And he said, culture eats strategy for lunch. In those direct terms. And I said, now, what do you mean? I mean, wow, culture? And, culture is a phrase that's bandied around very often today, and loosely, I might say. I have had firsthand experience having worked with the deans and several leadership team members here at Keiser to experience firsthand the flagship campus culture. And let me paraphrase that statement if I can for just a moment. What I believe Dr. Drucker was trying to point out is you can have the best strategy in the world, you can have the best team that's going to execute that strategy, but if they are not aligned, if they are not living out the values that are important to the company, to the business, your strategy means nothing. And I believe that. Dr. Vonk, I'm going to hold you responsible for that.
Uh-oh.
You are responsible for the culture here. And could you share what you have done or what your team has done to get this culture the way that it is today at the flagship campus?
Well, part of culture, besides yogurt, of course, part of culture.
You can't resist yourself.
I didn't miss that opportunity. But part of the culture besides that is how you create an environment that people are certainly empowered to do the right things, to do the things that they realize that they've been kind of assigned as a responsibility. But they also know when to turn around and say, hey, give me a hand. Not just up, but sideways. Give me culturally speaking, my dean of students can talk to my dean of the dean of academics and say, here's my situation, here's my problem. They don't need to involve me in that.
Mm-hmm.
We have to create that culture in order for people to understand that we are in an environment where creativity is rewarded, creativity is important, but clearly also responsibility is also important. So we can do those sorts of things and work organizationally between the primary components of our organization to be able to work together to achieve the objectives that we have. Maybe not even sitting around the table as leadership, but between two people saying, what do you think we need to do? And culture lets them make those decisions. Yeah. I'd rather they do all that and come to me later and say, oh, by the way, this is what we did. Here's how we did it. Here's what we're going to accomplish. And I almost invariably say, that's great. Thank you very much for doing that. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, if there is a variable that I might interject that says, here's something we might have considered, I also say that because I think that if I miss the opportunity for them to be able to grow in the environment and to realize the questions that they should ask, that they need to ask, might not have been done, then they will ask them next time. And so creating that culture where everybody can integrate together to work closely with each other to realize that they don't have to sit around and see some silos between the team members, I think it's important for the organization to be able to do stuff and accomplish things that ultimately we have a lot of things in front of us that we need to accomplish here. That culture is going to help us accomplish those objectives.
Mm-hmm. And what I've experienced firsthand is that your deans, who I work with, as you know, live out that culture. They live out the values that are important to the flagship campus. They live it out. And by the way, that cascades down to the students. Mm-hmm. They feel it. They see it every day. I watch how the interactions are with you and your deans and the students. And I'm just going to say it. I think it's unique, okay, in higher education today because it's students first and it's just not a catchy phrase. It's lived out. And those are the strong values. Okay, we're going to wrap up this masterclass, but I have one more question for you, sir.
As a real rapper.
As a real rapper-upper. And the question is, somewhere out in that audience is a younger Dr. Vonk, a younger Gary. Could be someone that started a business, could be an executive in a Fortune 500 company, could be an entrepreneur that's ready to scale their business. What would be some advice that you would give our audience of that younger Gary Vonk who's embracing the opportunity going forward and getting ready to launch their career?
Well, I think the thing that to one of your points is that I think the drive for an understanding and a strategy development among not only where you are but where you ultimately may want to be, or even if you don't know where you want to be, know what resources there are out there to accomplish those objectives, and to find that group of people, that organizational stratus that lets you find the people that may be able to give you advice, give you direction, teach you how to do things. You may be in the operations department, but may be very interested in accounting. So you may spend some time, that once you accomplish your daily routine, you may spend time talking to people I think that would ultimately help you develop an understanding and or whether you'd like to be there. Because not everybody who starts in the school with a degree in X starts out ending up with a degree in X. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes they realize as time goes on that it's not necessarily exactly where they want to be. And so they can transition into something else. They may be in the business program and want to be ultimately end up in cinematic arts because they like to be able to develop and create an environment that really manifests not only what they are, but where they want to go and help other people understand that and help other people really transmit that information as well. So you can run a business, but you can also be able to talk about running that business and be able to do that. And that may ultimately be the best spot for you as a student. So we're in an environment where we know virtually every student, if not every student. We like to believe that we understand emotionally what they're doing and their commitment to school every day. I can remember greeting students at the one campus I worked at every day. For the first hour and a half of the day, I stood at the front door and greeted students. And what I wanted to know was how did they, I could tell from their demeanor how their night was, how their day was. This is 26-year-old females with a kid at home that want to come and be a nurse. And I would stand there and greet them and I could tell when they're out of line and when they need some help or not.
Mm-hmm.
So organizationally, that's very similar. I want to make sure that the team is really committed to doing those things healthy. They are committed to the things that they feel are important as well as that I feel are important, and we will work together to make sure those things coexist. That's the important part.
One nugget that I got from what you said, there were several, there's a lot there, but one nugget is for this young Dr. Vonk that's out there to be hungry to learn. Capture every opportunity you have to learn. Take advantage of the resources that may be out there for you. Be a lifelong learner, which obviously
Absolutely.
You have been that. Well, I think that captures all that we want to talk about today because you just experienced a masterclass. And let me remind you once again, if you're watching this, listening to this, wherever you might be, if you're not with a notepad, replay it again and write some notes because we've just heard Dr. Vonk share some wonderful, wonderful, very applicable, practical leadership insights for you. So thank you again, Dr.
Pleasure.
Vonk, for your time today.
Of course, thank you.
Well, that's it for this month's podcast. Audience, thank you so much for watching, listening. And next month, we'll be back again with another Lead the Way podcast. Bye for now from Keiser University Flagship Campus.